All right, moving on to chapter 43. Now we're talking about absolute music. So this is titled Absolutely Classic, Brahms and the 19th Century Symphony. Now, with the absolute music in the Romantic era, it's still there, even though more people were interested in the programmatic music. But we still have the multi-movement genres of the symphony, the concerto, and chamber music. Now, with absolute music, the form is the organizing element, and with Romantic composers, we have more freedoms with structures, and the repertoire continues to dominate orchestral concerts. So even though we have this affinity, this excitement, the popularity of program music, the in the actual orchestral concerts, the absolute music is still dominant in the performances. Now, for the form and the expression in the Romantic Symphony, music moved from the palace, from the courts and those areas, into the public concert halls. And during this time, the orchestra itself, the size of the ensemble has also increased. So we need a bigger place to hold the orchestra as well as the audience. So we moved out of the palace into the big concert halls. Now here we have an engraving, and this is the 19th century orchestra that's offered the composer new instruments and a larger ensemble. Now this engraving is an orchestral concert at the Covent Garden Theatre in London in 1846. Now the orchestra is not just the group that's down on the bottom, but it also extends up to the top there. I don't know if you can see that there's some percussion. We have a gong, we have the tubas. The orchestra itself is large, very large. Sorry, I talk about tuba a lot. It's just really exciting to see it there. All right, so moving on. Now the symphonic structure, the framework that the composers are using, is steadily getting longer and more expansive. Now, with the classical style, we have the structure that everyone's used to and expecting to hear. And, there's not much room to take things apart and put it back together and transform it, outside of that little development section in the sonata allegro form. Now, but with the Romantic era, the orchestra is bigger, the ability to manipulate the music, the orchestration. Composers now are taking the time and going from a 20-minute Mozart symphony to a 20-minute movement of a Romantic symphony. The composers are taking more and more time to be able to express what they want to say. We have we have less output in symphonies in the Romantic era compared to the classical era. Where you could have 40 or 50 symphonies that are much shorter, we have maybe 4 to 9, maybe even 5 symphonies in the composer's lifetime. So the output of symphonies is smaller, but the density, the expansion within it, it's much longer, much more detailed, and the composers are taking the time to do that. So we have lyrical themes, we have harmonic experiments, and individual expression. And so all this stuff, the composers are free to, maneuver in their orchestras. So we have larger orchestras, and we also have new instruments, like we've talked about before. Now with the expanded symphonic form, like the movement 1, this is usually the most dramatic, and it generally still retains that sonata allegro form, but there's an option for a slow introduction beforehand. And the features a long expressive development, so even longer than what's normally expected. Now movement 2 is a loose 3-part form, and it may retain the slow lyrical nature, but it also could be a whimsical or playful, or maybe even a tragic, moving from whimsical and playful to tragic, and then passionate. Movement 3 usually is a strong rhythmic dance or scherzo, and it has overtones of some humor or surprise or caprice or folk dance. And then movement 4 is often in the sonata allegro form, but it has the dimension and the character to balance the first movement, and it usually has a note of triumph or pathos. So if the first movement is, very dramatic and serious, maybe the fourth movement could be that triumphant, we're in major, or it could also be something of like pain or anguish or something really grave and serious. So movements 1 and 4 kind of tidy everything up together. So with Brahms, in the Romantic Symphony, we have Johannes Brahms, and he was born 1833 and died in 1897. He was a German composer and conductor, and he was mentored by Robert and Clara Schumann. He moved to Vienna from Germany, and he became enormously successful. But he was a traditionalist, and he wrote absolute music in the classical forms. And he had a lifelong affection for folk music. Here we have a painting of Johannes Brahms. Very prominent beard. That's how I always recognize him. Now, at age 40, he began composing symphonic works. Now, that's a long time to go through life before writing a symphony. Now, I mentioned in class earlier that after Beethoven died, nobody knew what to do, especially about the symphony. He changed the game. Everyone was kind of, sticking their toe in the water, like, how can I top that? How can I write something that's, going to be surpassing this masterpiece of Beethoven's Ninth? And so he wrote other things, but he first started his first symphony when he was 40. So he wrote a total of 4 symphonies, but it was, even though it's a smaller output of past composers for symphonies, his conception, design was unsurpassed by anybody else. And he wrote concertos with a full-scale symphonic structure. Now his output for his music, we have 4 symphonies, 4 concertos, major contributions to chamber music, piano, and about 200 solo songs. Now we're going to look at Brahms Symphony number 3 in F major, and this was written at age 50. Now this was the shortest of his 4 symphonies, but it's the most romantic in tone, with shifting moods and timbres and creative invention. Now one of the cool things about Brahms' music is his use of syncopation. And syncopation is when we start to have an emphasis that's not on the main downbeat. So if our tempo or if our beat is like this, he may have a melody or some passage that's in between. Da 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 da. Like it's on the upbeats, and it's held over to the upbeat of the next beat, and it kind of blurs the lines of like where the structure of the downbeat is. And that's one of the other things about romantic music is we have that push and pull with the tempo, with the rubato, and we start to have kind of fuzziness of where the beats are, and that kind of goes with that whole swirling of emotions and passions and just not having that clean cut structure that we have in the classical era. So here we have a painting of Brahms's study and personal library in Vienna, and this is a 19th century painting. Lots of books, lots of scores. Now back to Symphony number 3. The form is still in a classical structure, And it opens with a dramatic three-note motive, and we hear the notes F, A flat, and then F. And it's kind of like a, I don't want to say musical joke, but it's like a motto. Sometimes composers would spell out things with the note names themselves. And so the F, A flat, F, F, A flat, F, Brahms had a personal motto of frei aber froh, which means free but happy. And this little motive would permeate the entire symphony, not just in the one movement. It would happen throughout the whole symphony and all the movements. So with Listening Guide 35, the Symphony Number 3 was written in 1883, and it uses the A-B-A prime structure with a brief coda, and this is in C minor. Now we have a moderate triple meter waltz, so a 3-beat pattern, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and it's rhythmically complex. So we have 3 against 2 patterns, and then we have syncopation. So if you're feeling the 3 pattern, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. If we have that going, and then we have a 2 pattern against that, da, 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 da. It has that ambiguity. We don't know where the main beat is because we have a 2 pattern against a 3 pattern at the same time. So he's blurred the lines of where the beats are, where the structure of the beats are in the meter. So we don't know if we're in the 2-beat meter or we're in the 3-beat meter. Now in the A section, we are hearing a yearning cello melody that it opens with. And in the B section, we are in a major key, and it's very expressive, but it has a chromatic accompaniment. And then it ends quietly on a last chord with pizzicato strings. So it's very soft, and the strings are plucking on that last chord. All right, so let's take a listen to the third movement of Brahms' Symphony Number 3 in F major. Sorry, just to interrupt. Hearing this, I always feel like this is like some Italian or Spanish like love song. I don't know, it just has that ooh feeling. I don't know how to describe it, but that's one of the characteristics I always hear and see in romantic music. That flowiness. you hear the push and pull of the tempo getting a little faster and then a little slower as it's crescendoing and decrescendoing? So we're in the B section. Back to the A theme. Moving ahead. And that's it for chapter 43. See you in class.